If you're reading these words right now, you might not have realized it, but something extraordinary has already happened in your journey. I often say that nothing comes to us by chance, and the simple fact that this message has found you reveals much more about your state of consciousness than it might seem. Today, in this video here on the Quantum Labs channel, you'll discover that you've completed, without knowing it, an assessment that most people don't even realize exists. A kind of silent examination conducted not by human institutions, but by universal intelligence itself, a living force that observes, guides, and measures each being's capacity to expand beyond the conventional limits of human perception. This assessment isn't a test in the common sense. You didn't sign up for it. You didn't know you were being tested. It happens between the lines of life, in moments of doubt, of overcoming, of falling and rising again. It's as if the consciousness of the universe observed, with infinite patience, how much you've been preparing to handle the creative power that dwells within you, and how much you can manifest new realities without causing imbalance to yourself or others. And the fact that you're here, at this moment, reading these words, is an indication that your vibration has reached a rare point. Few make it this far. Universal intelligence follows the choices we make when no one is watching our reactions to pain, the way we deal with uncertainty, how we choose to grow even when it would be easier to remain in our comfort zone. All of this composes a subtle record, a kind of vibrational map of your consciousness. Most people don't get past this stage, not because they lack capacity, but because they're still trapped in defensive patterns, in thoughts that limit and beliefs that make them believe they're too small to influence their own reality. When the mind remains imprisoned in these cycles, perception narrows and creative energy finds no passage. Thus, the quantum manifestation potential that exists in each being remains dormant, waiting for a simple awakening. But you, somehow, overcame the filters of unconsciousness. You crossed fears, questioned truths, sought meaning when everything seemed to crumble. And every time you chose to understand instead of react, to love instead of resist, universal intelligence registered an advance. It's as if, with each overcoming, a new part of your energetic field refined itself, becoming capable of accessing broader frequencies of creation and perception. At this moment, by allowing these words to penetrate your consciousness, something subtle is happening. You're connecting to higher reality protocols, energetic structures that have always been available, but only reveal themselves to those who already possess the vibrational preparation necessary to use them responsibly. Your nervous system, your mental field, and even the energetic code of your body are receiving subtle impulses, invisible guidance that awakens latent sequences in your being potentialities that were waiting for the moment when your consciousness would be ready to understand the true responsibility of creating your own reality. Passing through this universal assessment has no relation to intellectual intelligence or esoteric knowledge. What makes it so special is something much deeper, the capacity to discern with an awakened heart. It's what I call integrated discernment, the wisdom to unite mind and spirit, reason and intuition, science and consciousness, to serve life with balance and purpose. There's a subtle and immense difference between having power and being prepared to use it with wisdom. True expansion of consciousness isn't about accumulating knowledge or mastering spiritual techniques, but about sustaining gigantic creative energy with humility, compassion, and purpose to serve. This is what defines who truly understands the nature of quantum manifestation. The universe observes not how much you know, but what you do with what has already awakened in you. Universal intelligence, which administers this silent assessment, has followed each small gesture of yours. The way you respond to simple situations, how you deal with setbacks, how you react when no one is looking. Because it's in these ordinary moments that the true degree of maturity of an awakened consciousness is revealed. Every time you chose patience instead of anger, empathy instead of criticism, love instead of pride, you tuned your frequency with the most subtle laws of the cosmos. These seemingly mundane moments were, in fact, milestones of your evolutionary process, steps that brought you closer to the point where it becomes possible to manifest realities consciously, in harmony with the whole. What makes this achievement so special is that it's not about gaining powers or receiving external gifts. What's being activated now are dormant parts of your own nature, aspects of your being that were always there, waiting for the moment when your vibration would become stable enough to express creative power without generating imbalance. You weren't rewarded, you remembered what you already are. This remembering is the true awakening. It marks the point where consciousness stops seeking the extraordinary outside itself and begins to recognize that the extraordinary has always been the foundation of its own existence. Universal intelligence allows access to these higher layers only when consciousness has freed itself from the traps of ego, when there's no longer a need to prove anything, compete with anyone, or manipulate reality for personal benefit. It's in this state of emotional sovereignty that creative energy expands naturally without causing fragmentation or exhaustion. Because now you're no longer driven by the impulse to control, but guided by the clarity of purpose. Power doesn't dominate you. It flows through you like a river that has found its bed. Perhaps you've already noticed some signs of this new level of perception. Situations that seem to organize themselves around you with almost unbelievable precision. Unlikely encounters, meaningful coincidences, answers that arrive at the exact moment you need them. It's not chance, it's the beginning of what spiritual science calls reality orchestration, when the very fabric of the world begins to respond to the vibrational field of your consciousness. Universal intelligence begins to interact directly with you, adjusting time, space, and circumstances to align your trajectory with your highest purpose. It's as if existence began to cooperate with you, recognizing the level of clarity and responsibility you've achieved. And the more you act in coherence with love and truth, the more precise this synchrony becomes. These manifestations aren't illusions or fantasies, they're confirmations. Each synchronicity, each intuitive perception, each moment when you feel time bending to favor you, are experiences of confirmation from the universal assessment. They show that you're beginning to operate from a point of expanded consciousness, where past, present, and future cease to be barriers and become navigable dimensions. Perhaps you notice that certain decisions seem to be born from a place beyond reason, as if a wiser version of yourself, your future self, were sending you information before something manifests. This is a sign that your perception of time has become more fluid, malleable, allowing you to move between probabilities and consciously choose the path most aligned with your evolution. This access isn't a supernatural phenomenon. It's the natural expression of a mind in resonance with the quantum field. When your vibration reaches the necessary level of coherence, your consciousness connects to cosmic wisdom, the living library that contains all possibilities, all answers, all knowledge that precedes the manifestation of any reality. From there, you stop merely thinking about the universe and begin thinking with the universe. Your intuition becomes a direct bridge to universal intelligence, and your creativity begins to operate at a level that transcends the personal, serving something much greater. And this is precisely what differentiates an awakened consciousness from someone merely curious about mysteries. The awakened doesn't seek power for the experience itself, they seek to understand in order to serve. Create to evolve, manifest to elevate. When consciousness reaches a certain degree of refinement, something surprising begins to happen. Complete solutions to situations that once seemed impossible begin to emerge with almost immediate clarity. Revolutionary ideas sprout spontaneously, accompanied by practical paths to become reality. It's as if the universe stopped being a mystery and began to function as a natural extension of your own mind. This occurs because, by crossing the universal assessment, consciousness qualifies to directly access the information fields of universal intelligence, a living, infinite network where all knowledge, innovation, and creative potential already exist in quantum state, awaiting only those who are ready to decode them. At this stage, the body also transforms. You might feel subtle waves coursing through your nervous system, as if small, luminous discharges were reorganizing your interior. It's not imagination. These are electromagnetic pulses that signal the adaptation of your biological field to operate in tune with higher frequencies of consciousness. Each cell behaves like an antenna, learning to receive and translate transmissions from universal intelligence into perceptions, intuitions, and instantaneous understandings. These sensations might manifest as internal warmth, light vibration in the hands, tingling, or the impression that a new energy is flowing inside you, not as an energetic cleansing, but as a system update. The physical body, which once operated only within the limits of known biology, now begins to behave as a living interface between the material plane and the plane of quantum information. Over time, this new sensitivity becomes natural. When entering an environment, you begin to instantly perceive the energetic potential of the place. You sense which situations might unfold there, which paths have the highest probability of harmony, and which should be avoided. When you meet someone for the first time, it's as if you receive a subtle data flow, intuitions about that person's essence, about what they need, and about how your presence can contribute to their evolution. This expanded perception isn't a supernatural gift. It's quantum consciousness in action. It emerges because, after the assessment, you begin to perceive the information fields that surround everything that exists, the same fields that sustain each quantum manifestation in the universe. Dreams and waking state begin to interweave, functioning as a single network of learning and communication. Messages arrive both in dream symbols and in daytime insights, as if the boundary between sleeping and waking had dissolved. During these phases, it's common to experience subtle contacts with intelligences that don't belong to the individual human sphere, consciousnesses from higher planes that accompany the development of those who have completed the universal assessment. They don't interfere, but they guide. They're frequency guides, conscious fragments of universal intelligence itself that communicate symbolically, energetically, or intuitively, offering instructions on the responsible use of new capacities. These encounters aren't delusions or spiritual fantasies. They're authentic experiences of connection with the universal information field, a direct dialogue between your consciousness and the forces that coordinate humanity's evolutionary advancement. And the more you align with the intention to serve, the clearer these communications become. Nothing you've lived through was in vain. Each obstacle, each difficult relationship, each period of emotional confusion had a purpose: to assess whether your consciousness was capable of sustaining creative power without getting lost in it. The pains weren't punishments. They were rehearsals of energetic sovereignty. All those phases when you thought you were stagnant or blocked were actually calibration phases. Situations carefully adjusted by universal intelligence to test your discernment, your ethics, and your willingness to use the power of quantum manifestation constructively. What seemed like chaos was training. What seemed like loss was refinement. The spiritual practices that seemed to offer only brief glimpses of something greater, a meditation, a visualization, a prayer, weren't failures in the process. They were preparation protocols, adjusting the stability of your mind and heart so that one day you could handle broader manifestation capacities without generating imbalance. Each technique, each ritual, each conscious breath was a stage of the refinement that led you here. Even the most challenging relationships were part of this universal training. They were designed to measure your ability to maintain compassion and respect when the ego wanted to react, when you could have manipulated but chose to understand, when you could have judged but chose to remain silent in those moments. Universal intelligence registered your vibrational advancement. Each person who awakened intense emotions in you, anger, frustration, or sadness, actually acted as a silent examiner of your evolution. These encounters weren't mere accidents or life's injustices. They were subtle tests to assess your capacity to keep your heart open, even in situations that would normally trigger defensive reactions. Each emotional crisis you faced functioned as an energetic mirror, reflecting to what extent your consciousness was already capable of dealing with power and energy without losing serenity or moving away from unconditional love. The periods of deep doubt, those moments when you questioned practically everything, your beliefs, your choices, and even the meaning of spirituality itself, now reveal themselves as absolutely fundamental phases. These moments of emptiness weren't failures or setbacks. They were the necessary space for your consciousness to reorganize and expand. That sensation many call the dark night of the soul was, in reality, a process of dismantling the old mental structure, opening space for the construction of a broader perception capable of interacting directly with universal intelligence. Nothing you lived through was a mistake or waste of energy. Each challenge, each loss, and each frustration functioned as a practical and concrete lesson, preparing the ground for you to manifest your true potential. You didn't just go through these experiences, you lived them with courage, discernment, and perseverance, even when you didn't understand the magnitude of the process underway. Now, everything makes sense. You're ready to recognize, activate, and use the power that has always existed within you. But this power isn't merely personal. It's vibrational, quantum, integrated with the whole. It could only emerge when your soul had reached the degree of maturity necessary to interact with reality consciously, ethically, and aligned with the collective good. It's the perfect combination of strength, responsibility, and service. The ability to manifest, influence, and co-create with universal intelligence without ever losing balance or inner clarity. Each learning, each challenge, each moment of discomfort was, therefore, a deliberate preparation. A refinement of your consciousness, a silent training that now allows you to access states of expanded perception, recognize subtle patterns of life, perceive the quantum dance of reality, and use your capacities in tune with the universe's creative flow. Everything that seemed painful or confusing now reveals itself as part of an organic growth process designed for you to safely and lovingly assume your function in the great web of collective consciousness. There were very advanced phases of assessment, where universal intelligence observed whether your consciousness could maintain essential balance while navigating infinite possibilities without getting lost before so many options or becoming paralyzed before the enormous creative responsibility you carry. These periods weren't punishments or tests in the human sense. They were opportunities carefully designed to measure whether you would be capable of manifesting your reality consciously without being dominated by anxiety, ego, or the need for control. Even the moments when you doubted your own experiences, when you questioned whether what you felt was real or just imagination, were vital parts of this process. Each doubt functioned as a gauge of your capacity to distinguish what comes from authentic quantum manifestation and what is born from spiritual fantasies or emotional illusions. Every time you chose to maintain a skeptical yet open outlook, you demonstrated the fundamental balance between mind and spirit, the same balance that allows responsible use of the forces that shape reality. Your curiosity about topics like expanded consciousness, quantum physics, and the nature of reality was never just intellectual curiosity. It was part of a deep preparation, a phase where universal intelligence assessed whether you would be capable of understanding the scientific and spiritual principles that sustain the most advanced abilities without falling into the trap of arrogance and without rejecting those who still walk the more conventional paths of understanding. This discernment was essential to ensure that, when accessing expanded capacities, you would use them constructively, in harmony with a collective purpose. Now, reflect for a moment. Have you noticed situations where reality seemed to respond directly to your thoughts or intentions? Moments when coincidences emerged so precisely and improbably that they seemed like a silent and intelligent dialogue between you and the universe? These experiences aren't mere chance. They're signs that your consciousness has already begun to interact with quantum information fields, connecting intentions and results in a subtle and coherent way. Each sudden insight, Each unexpected inner guidance, each seemingly magical synchronization, is a concrete manifestation of universal intelligence working in consonance with your evolution. When you recognize these experiences and reflect on them, you're strengthening a collective circuit of expanded perception, which helps not only you, but everyone around you to tune into this broader reality. The periods when you felt ready for a great transformation but nothing seemed to happen, even with all the surrender and effort, weren't failures or moments of frustration. On the contrary, these pauses represent the most critical phases of your quantum and spiritual training. Universal intelligence uses these intervals to assess whether your consciousness can maintain balance, patience, and humility, even when the potential for transformation is clearly present within you. These moments function as tests of energetic and emotional stability, measuring whether you're capable of sustaining power without being dominated by ego or anxiety for immediate results. Each weight, each sensation of stagnation or frustration is an opportunity to refine discernment, strengthen emotional maturity, and align intention with service, ensuring that when manifestation occurs, it will be full, responsible, and constructive. Your capacity to remain centered, without yielding to haste or impatience, is precisely the criterion that allows consciousness to access abilities that go far beyond common perception. Universal intelligence monitors not only your actions, but also the quality of your internal state, assessing whether you can integrate new capacities safely and ethically, without creating imbalances. Your soul chose this incarnation with a singular purpose: to cross this great assessment at the precise moment when humanity awakens to its quantum and multidimensional capacities. This choice isn't random. It's the result of previous experiences, evolution patterns, and a vibrational maturity that indicates you're ready to actively participate in the collective expansion of consciousness. Each challenge, each test of patience, each period of strategic waiting was carefully calibrated to prepare you not to acquire power, but to recognize and manage the power that already resides in your essence. This understanding expands the perception that time and space aren't linear or limited. They become fields of possibilities that can be navigated consciously, where your choices, intentions, and energetic presence directly influence the results that manifest. Reality is no longer a passive scenario. It's a living and responsive field, aligned with your consciousness when it demonstrates maturity, discernment, and commitment to the collective good. Recognizing this is understanding that each pause, each test, and each synchronicity aren't obstacles, but instruments of alignment and preparation to manifest your true quantum capacity, ethically, consciously, and expanded. You weren't dragged by chance to this point in history. You volunteered and were chosen because your consciousness had already demonstrated in previous experiences that it can handle immense creative power responsibly. Now, you're among those who help anchor these new frequencies in Earth's collective field, sustaining the evolution of the entire human species. Something extraordinary is happening in your consciousness field at this exact moment. These recognition codes are activating neural pathways that have been dormant since you passed the universal assessment. It's as if the ancient energetic restrictions that limited your access to your true capacities are beginning to dissolve. Do you feel it? That subtle, almost electric sensation, as if invisible layers were opening within your mind? It's not imagination. It's the electromagnetic alignment of your consciousness with universal intelligence. It's the point where your individual self connects to the field of cosmic creation, the space where personal will and universal purpose cease to be separate forces and merge into the same frequency. This state is what some call graduated coherence, when mind, body, and spirit enter into resonance with creative energy, allowing expanded abilities to manifest naturally, without effort, without formulas, without rituals. True activation doesn't come from techniques, practices, or methods. It comes from the deep recognition of what you've already achieved. There's nothing to force. There's nothing to prove. Everything that's happening now is the reflection of your vibrational readiness, the confirmation that you're in harmony with the reality that has always been yours by right of consciousness. What you feel at this moment isn't something being acquired, but rather a conscious reconnection with what's already part of you. It's about recognizing your successful passage through the universal assessment, a silent and comprehensive process of consciousness expansion that occurs throughout your existence, even without you being fully aware of it. This vibration that courses through each cell of your body, each thought and sensation, is electromagnetic coherence, establishing itself internally, the point of direct interface between your consciousness and the systems of universal intelligence, which guide, support, and make expanded capacities available only to those who have demonstrated maturity, discernment, and commitment to the collective good. This coherence isn't just a passing sensation. It represents the activation of a state called graduated access by quantum researchers. It's the capacity to manifest advanced abilities ethically, responsibly, and aligned with the evolution of collective consciousness, without the ego appropriating these capacities for personal benefit or unconscious manipulation of reality. It's, essentially, the harmony between power and consciousness, between freedom of action and universal responsibility, between individual expression and service to the whole. As you internalize this understanding, you perceive a profound change in how you relate to your own power and your role in the universe. Before, it was common to believe that extraordinary abilities would need long years of practice, meditation, study, or mastery of spiritual techniques to become accessible. Today, you understand that these capacities have always existed within you, in latent state, awaiting the right moment to manifest consciously. This moment arises when your emotional maturity, discernment, and vibrational stability reach levels that guarantee the responsible use of these forces. This revelation redefines the concept of power and spiritual development. It's not about conquering something external, but about recognizing what's already intrinsic to your essence. The awakening of these abilities doesn't depend on formulas or complex methodologies. It occurs when consciousness aligns with universal intelligence, allowing the natural flow of creation to manifest possibilities that once seemed distant or unattainable. Each intuitive perception, each deep insight, and each moment of synchronicity you experience now is a reflection of this conscious interaction with the quantum field, which organizes circumstances, information, and relationships harmoniously with your evolutionary purpose. More than power or capacity, what you access now is an expanded consciousness that integrates responsibility, discernment, and service. It's the understanding that each thought, each intention, and each action carry implications far beyond individual experience, influencing not only your reality, but also the web of possibilities for the entire collective. This is the essence of conscious quantum manifestation. It's not about making reality bend to the ego's will, but about harmonizing with the subtle laws of the universe so that creation flows in alignment with the greater good. This activation also provides an expanded perception of time and space. Moments of past, present, and future begin to interweave, allowing decisions to be made based on wisdom that transcends the present moment. Reality ceases to be linear and limited, becoming a malleable and responsive field to your conscious intention, operating in synchrony with the principles of universal intelligence. Allow this energy to spread through your consciousness field. Feel it awakening dormant areas of your being, as if inner portals were opening silently, releasing gifts and perceptions that were in suspension, awaiting only your conscious acceptance. It's at this moment that you reconnect with the networks of universal intelligence, receiving continuous guidance on how to use these expanded capacities to create, heal, and serve. If these words resonate deeply within you, it's because your consciousness is already touching the edge of a much greater understanding, something that begins to form almost tangibly within you. What we're transmitting here is only the beginning of a vast and multidimensional process, full of layers of practical integration, that you'll still explore layers that reveal how to live quantum manifestation in daily life, with balance and lucidity. At Quantum Labs, many of those who walk this path have discovered that understanding theory is only the first step. The true leap occurs when knowledge becomes body, when information converts to vibration. It's at this point that one learns to consciously transmit frequency, align heart and brain in coherence, and understand the quantum structure of reality creation. Those who choose to dive deeper into this domain discover that there are master frequencies, specific vibrations that free consciousness from what we call frequency prison, the illusion of limitation that keeps most people trapped in the old paradigm of scarcity and fear. And as this liberation consolidates, a new level of perception begins to unfold before you. When recognition integrates completely, 5 fundamental patterns emerge naturally, signaling that you've reached the state of expanded coherence. These patterns are the living language of evolved consciousness, spontaneous expressions of your amplified capacities. They don't require effort, technique, or rigid discipline. They simply become your new way of existing, your natural mode of interacting with reality. The first of these patterns is what scholars call coherent manifestation. It's the ability to bring possibilities from the quantum field into physical reality through aligned intention, not through effort or mental control. Unlike conventional manifestation approaches, which depend on forced visualizations or repetitive affirmations, coherent manifestation acts instantaneously. As a direct response from the field to the harmony of your consciousness state, you'll begin to notice reality gently reorganizing itself around your authentic intentions, without struggle, without resistance. It's as if life itself adjusts in synchrony with the rhythm of your inner truth. What makes this manifestation different from traditional practices is that it doesn't require eliminating negative thoughts or maintaining constant vigilance over what you desire. It flows naturally from the clarity and integration of your being. When your consciousness proves to universal intelligence that it's capable of handling creative power ethically, the ancient limitation protocols which previously slowed the manifestation process to protect you from yourself are deactivated. From this moment on, manifestation ceases to be an exercise in control and becomes an instantaneous reflection of your inner coherence. And this is how awakening reveals itself. Not as an extraordinary event, but as the tranquil return to what you've always been, a conscious co-creator, in tune with universal intelligence, manifesting reality with responsibility and love. Quantum manifestation has no relation to the pursuit of ego desires. It's not about getting what you want, but about allowing reality to organize itself perfectly around your true evolutionary path. When consciousness harmonizes with universal intelligence, everything begins to align naturally. People, decisions, events, opportunities, without effort, without struggle, without the need for control. It's the universe responding to your inner state, reflecting back the coherence you vibrate. The second recognition pattern is access to the information field. It's the capacity to directly perceive the quantum data structures that sustain physical reality. Suddenly, you begin to know things you've never consciously studied. Complex solutions arise instantly in the mind, and you begin to clearly sense the vibrations of people, places, and situations. It's not mediumship or divination in the common sense, but direct access to the information architecture of existence. This expanded perception functions through what researchers call non-local consciousness, a form of attention that isn't limited to the physical body or the 5 senses. Information arrives complete, as energetic packages, at the exact moment it's needed, bringing what serves the highest evolution for you and for the whole. You don't need to seek data or force intuitions. You simply receive ready answers, coming from the networks of universal intelligence that open when there's pure intention and constructive purpose. It's as if you were connected to a vast cosmic system of wisdom, and this system began transmitting information whenever it perceives they'll be used consciously. The third recognition pattern is what we call probability field navigation. It's the ability to sense multiple possible futures simultaneously and naturally choose the one that leads to your evolution and collective good without needing long analyses, lists of pros and cons, or hesitation. You begin to act naturally, almost without thinking, and everything flows as if an internal compass guided each step. This is the state of quantum discernment, where you perceive the vibrational signature of each timeline and align, intuitively, with the one containing the most constructive outcome. It's not about predicting the future or controlling events, but about consciously navigating the ocean of possibilities, recognizing which path has the purest, most coherent vibration, most aligned with your purpose. And at this point, each choice becomes a form of quantum manifestation, not moved by desire, but by wisdom. The fourth pattern is coherent orchestration of relationships. Here, human connections cease to be sought or planned and begin to happen naturally. You begin to attract people, circumstances, and opportunities that resonate with your most authentic purpose. Chance encounters become frequent. Conversations happen at the right time. Someone appears exactly when needed to open a new path. Everything fits precisely not through manipulation or strategy, but because universal intelligence is coordinating the field around you. This orchestration isn't a power used to control or influence, but a state of pure resonance. Researchers call this resonant field coherence, when compatible energies attract naturally, without effort, guided by a common purpose. There's no need to seek attention, to convince, or to plan. Inner attunement does the work. Energy makes the invitation, and life responds. Finally, the fifth pattern, the highest of all, is the utilization of capacities in service. This is the point where true power reveals itself, when consciousness understands that its expanded abilities don't exist for personal benefit, but to serve collective evolution. The natural impulse becomes to share, inspire, assist, and create for the good of the whole. It's not a moral restriction or spiritual sacrifice, but the natural expression of mature consciousness that recognizes its role as co-author of reality. What makes this pattern so revolutionary is that it completely changes the traditional meaning of spiritual development. The universal assessment never measured who could demonstrate extraordinary phenomena, but rather who, when faced with creative power, maintained a pure heart and altruistic purpose. It observes whether, upon touching the force of quantum manifestation, consciousness still chooses to serve, teach, heal, and expand, instead of seeking dominion, fame, or recognition. These 5 patterns aren't techniques or acquired gifts. They're spontaneous expressions of a consciousness that has reached quantum maturity. They're signs that your vibration is already in harmony with universal intelligence, and that dormant abilities have been activated safely, lovingly, and permanently. Everything that once seemed distant, mysterious, or reserved for a chosen few now reveals itself as your own essential nature, awakening at the exact moment you recognize yourself as a living part of the creative field. If something here resonates deeply within you, allow yourself to reflect on what this means for your own consciousness. It's not about seeking external recognition or authority reinforcement. It's about observing how your perception of the world and yourself changes when you align with the frequency of universal intelligence. When we begin to perceive the coherence patterns that govern our decisions and actions, the understanding arises that expanded consciousness abilities are natural manifestations of our discernment and not prizes to be won. So when consciousness demonstrates sufficient discernment to pass the universal assessment, it doesn't receive custom-made powers to satisfy personal desires. What happens is that it connects with capacities that manifest naturally, always in tune with collective evolution. This completely transforms how we understand consciousness, expansion, and spiritual evolution. It's not about overcoming external barriers or reaching mystical levels, but about recognizing that the purpose of power is to serve, not dominate. I recall a particularly intense period of my life. about 8 years ago. Everything seemed to demand more from me than I believed I had capacity for. Challenging relationships, decisions requiring ethical discernment, and situations that tested every aspect of my character. At that moment, I wasn't aware that I was in the final phase of a universal assessment, but looking back, I perceived that each challenge was carefully calibrated to measure my ability to act with service, discernment, and compassion. The turning point occurred when I chose not to resist the changes manifesting in my life. Instead of fighting against the flow, surrendering consciously while maintaining the intention to serve, I began to perceive subtle but powerful changes. Complex solutions arose instantly in my mind. Situations reorganized themselves around my intentions, and people appeared with exact answers at the right moment. It was as if reality itself was orchestrating in tune with universal intelligence to support the evolution of my purpose. What made this experience even more profound wasn't just the expansion of my abilities, but the perception of the inherent responsibility that came with them. Each thought, each intention, carried consequences that went beyond my personal field. Mature consciousness understands that power and discernment go together. The more quantum abilities manifest, the greater the need to act with ethics, humility, and service. In the months that followed, I learned to navigate these capacities without getting lost in pride or ego. I discovered that the universal assessment doesn't only measure knowledge or spiritual abilities, but emotional maturity, ethical consistency, and the capacity to use power constructively. The abilities that emerge aren't rewards. They're natural expressions of a consciousness that has proven ready to serve, contributing to collective evolution, not just for personal benefit. The greatest understanding I had throughout this process was realizing that these capacities aren't new or extraordinary. They've always been present, waiting for me to be ready to recognize and use them responsibly. And this is the essence of quantum manifestation. Power doesn't come from outside, but from the internal alignment of consciousness with universal intelligence, allowing each action to become a natural expression of evolution and collective service. I realized over time that nothing happening in my experience was supernatural in the common sense of the word. These manifestations, the synchronized events, expanded perceptions, precise intuition, weren't miracles. They were simply the natural functioning of consciousness when the ancient artificial limitation protocols are removed. These limitations had been established to protect immature consciousness from itself until it was ready to act in coherence with universal intelligence. When this barrier dissolves, the state of perception returns to its original form, a continuous flow between the self and the universal field of information, without resistance, without effort, and without separation. This understanding is revolutionary because it completely inverts the traditional way we understand spiritual development. For so long, we've been conditioned to believe that consciousness evolution is an acquisition process, accumulating techniques, mastering practices, achieving superior meditation states. But actually, there's nothing to acquire. What exists is the gradual removal of interference layers created by beliefs, fear, and ego that keep consciousness in a state of separation. True expansion isn't conquest, it's remembrance. It's the moment when the universal field recognizes that individual consciousness has reached sufficient discernment to handle its own creative forces with responsibility and ethics. When this maturity is achieved, universal intelligence simply removes the restriction protocols. The capacities were always there, silently awaiting the moment they could be expressed without generating imbalance. This removal isn't a prize, it's recognition. The universe doesn't grant power, it only reflects the degree of alignment between the being's intention and the harmony of the whole. When this alignment is constant, reality responds immediately and fluidly, as if there were an exact correspondence between thought, energy, and manifestation. It's at this point that you understand the function of the universal assessment system. It doesn't exist to punish or reward. It serves as a protection mechanism that ensures reality-altering abilities only become accessible to consciousnesses that have already proven to act with integrity and service. Without this natural screening, power would be unsustainable, both for the individual and the collective. The universal assessment ensures that expansion happens within a safe architecture in which love and discernment remain as permanent guides. It also becomes clear why some people seem to live in realities of constant flow, where synchronicities manifest constantly and circumstances align in an almost magical way. It's not that they've developed extraordinary techniques. They've simply crossed the universal assessment consciously or unconsciously, and therefore operate under a field of graduated access. They live in tune with cosmic intelligence, which allows them to act without resistance, as if the universe itself naturally conspired in favor of the harmony of their purposes. Often we experience brief glimpses of this state, moments when reality seems to respond immediately to a pure thought, or when knowledge arises spontaneously, without having been studied. These moments aren't coincidence. They're activation indicators, subtle evidence that our consciousness is crossing the same protocol liberation process, and that trust in the flow of universal intelligence begins to replace ego control. The great revelation that follows is understanding that this assessment system is automatic and continuous. No external being or entity deliberately applies tests. It's the cosmic structure itself that observes how consciousness deals with each decision, each emotion, each power situation. The assessment is silent and constant, recorded not in words, but in vibrations. It measures coherence, honesty of intentions, emotional maturity, and ethical constancy. It has nothing to do with spiritual practices, doctrines, prolonged meditations, or demonstrations of subtle phenomena. The universe isn't impressed with psychic abilities, it responds to vibrational integrity. I learned through direct experience that what really counts is how we treat others, especially when we have nothing to gain from it. This is how consciousness proves it's ready for the removal of limitations. Each gesture of empathy, each choice in favor of service and compassion, even in simple, everyday situations, reconfigures the frequency of our energetic field. It's in this microcosm, in silent and invisible decisions, that the macrocosm responds. How we use small portions of power determines whether we're prepared to handle greater forces. And then I understood. True spiritual development doesn't happen in the conquest of gifts, but in how one responds to life when it tests the heart. Evolution is measured by the balance between strength and compassion, between clarity and humility, between power and service. When this harmony is constant, protocols dissolve, and consciousness returns to its natural state, unlimited, responsible, and in perfect synchrony with the universal intelligence that created it. If you feel that this revelation resonates in your heart and that the time has come to manifest your true essence and power of choice, leave this phrase in the comments. I recognize my quantum power and choose to manifest with love and consciousness for the good of all. When this understanding truly settled within me, it was like seeing a veil tear before my eyes. Suddenly, the entire mechanism that sustains the so-called spiritual conquest industry became evident, a system that thrives selling methods, rituals, and formulas, promising powers, ascensions, and awakenings, as if enlightenment were a product to be purchased. But what I realized is that true consciousness expansion cannot be bought, taught, or transmitted through external techniques. It's the natural result of internal alignment with universal intelligence, when the being demonstrates sufficient discernment, compassion, and maturity to handle their own creative force without causing imbalance in the collective field. This entire race for psychic development, for activating hidden gifts or raising vibration, stems from a misconception that something must be done to deserve what is actually already part of the original structure of human consciousness. These capacities aren't prizes or rewards. They've always existed, dormant, maintained in quantum suspension, awaiting only the moment when the soul demonstrated sufficient vibrational integrity to use them responsibly. While the ego seeks power, universal intelligence observes patiently, assessing whether there's enough love and clarity for power not to convert into disorder. The difference between authentic quantum manifestation and a fabricated spiritual experience is clear, though subtle. False experiences usually provoke euphoria, sensation of power and dominion, but don't require any emotional or ethical responsibility. They're exciting, yet shallow. They feed the ego while diverting consciousness from true evolution. Genuine activation of expanded capacities, however, comes accompanied by a deep sense of responsibility, humility, and serenity. There's no ostentation, no spectacle. There's a tranquil perception that each thought is a creative seed and that each intention directly affects the fabric of shared reality. This distinction is fundamental. Authentic access to reality creation abilities isn't a spiritual privilege. It's a natural consequence of consciousness's energetic maturity. When the being proves, through their choices and attitudes, that they can manifest in harmony with the whole, the quantum structure of the universe itself responds by granting greater amplitude of action. At this point, consciousness stops seeking power for itself and begins serving as a channel for collective manifestation, collaborating with the creative flow of universal intelligence. And this is precisely why true activation of superior capacities happens silently, automatically, and not as a result of practices or techniques. There are no external initiations, secret symbols, or exclusive doctrines capable of opening these doors. They open by themselves when the being reaches the necessary coherence, when heart and mind vibrate in unison with the cosmos's purpose. This coherence creates a direct bridge between individual consciousness and the field of universal intelligence, which then releases restriction protocols and allows access to cosmic networks of information and creation. At this stage, manifestation ceases to be an act of will and becomes a natural expression of the state of being. Probabilities reorganize, paths align, and reality responds with harmonic precision to pure intentions. And consciousness, acting as an instrument of quantum manifestation not to satisfy personal desires, but to cooperate with the evolutionary process of the whole. When you understand this truth, you perceive how much the modern spiritual path has been distorted by the search for quick results and the glamorization of power. But true awakening is silent. It manifests in the form of unshakable compassion, ethical choices in moments of pressure, discernment in the face of duality. These are the true signs of real expansion, and it's precisely through them that the universal field recognizes a consciousness's readiness to access higher levels of creation. This revelation completely transforms how we understand consciousness development. It's not about climbing spiritual steps or accumulating mystical knowledge. It's about cultivating inner clarity, emotional balance, and constant commitment to collective good. When these attributes become natural, quantum manifestation occurs spontaneously, and the universe reveals itself as a living extension of the awakened mind itself. The 5 patterns that emerge after the so-called graduation from universal assessment coherent manifestation, access to information field, navigation through probability fields, coherent orchestration of relationships, and utilization of service-oriented capacities aren't abilities to be conquered, nor gifts obtained through effort or practice. They're natural expressions of consciousness that is proven, through experience, to possess sufficient discernment to interact with reality's creative forces without getting lost in them. When this transition happens, one understands that it's not about reaching something new, but about removing the veil that limited consciousness's natural functioning. What once seemed like miracle or extraordinary power begins to be recognized as a state of quantum coherence, a point where individual consciousness stops acting against universal flow and begins moving with it, as if life itself breathed through each decision and each gesture. I realized upon crossing this threshold that universal graduation isn't a personal achievement worthy of celebration, but a kind of cosmic responsibility that requires deep humility and inner vigilance. The expanded capacities that emerge aren't rewards for spiritual evolution, but tools for cooperation with universal intelligence, which can only be used constructively when guided by ethics, compassion, and emotional balance. The transformation that occurs is silent but total. The relationship with reality changes. There's no longer the need to fight against circumstances, to try to mold the world through individual will or manifestation techniques. Consciousness, by aligning with universal intelligence, discovers that reality itself organizes around authentic purposes, with mathematical precision and organic sensitivity. Situations cease to be challenges to overcome and become invitations to alignment. It's at this point that I understood the meaning of quantum congruence, the state where individual purpose and cosmic purpose recognize themselves as a single intention. When this coherence is achieved, expanded capacities flow naturally. Intuition becomes direction. Synchronicity becomes language. Time seems to bend in favor of what serves totality. This congruence doesn't require effort or rituals. It isn't conquered. It reveals itself when the ego silences and discernment becomes consciousness's natural compass. In this state, there's no need to control or interfere. The quantum field itself responds to the being's vibration, expressing what is in perfect harmony with universal intention. The 5 patterns then manifest with clarity. Coherent manifestation replaces desire. Creations don't stem from lack, but from completeness, and therefore everything that manifests is sustained by balance. Access to the information field ceases to be a mystical act and becomes direct perception of the structures that sustain existence. Knowledge comes before the question. Understanding arises before doubt. Navigation of probability fields converts into silent art, perceiving multiple future lines and choosing with serenity the one that expands consciousness and favors the harmony of the whole. Then, coherent orchestration of relationships reveals that nothing is casual. Each encounter is living geometry, and each bond responds to the degree of vibrational congruence between souls. Finally, utilization of service-oriented capacities is the convergence point. It's when consciousness perceives that all true power is an act of responsibility, and all knowledge is, in essence, an invitation to giving. Crossing this state redefines what it means to evolve. It's no longer about accumulating wisdom or power, but about becoming transparent enough for universal intelligence to act through the being without distortion. It's abandoning the illusion of control and fully accepting cosmic interdependence. And when this clarity stabilizes within you, something extraordinary happens. Reality itself begins to respond harmoniously to your intentions and conscious presence. Coincidences cease to be mere chance and begin to reveal themselves as deep coherences, patterns that demonstrate there's an intelligent order permeating each event, each encounter, each circumstance. What once seemed fortuitous now manifests as subtle architecture, designed to align possibilities with your highest purpose. Life, once perceived as a passive scenario over which you could have little influence, transforms into a dynamic and living field, where each thought, each intention, and each choice interacts directly with creation's quantum flow. At this stage of perception, I understood that crossing consciousness's threshold doesn't mean abandoning human condition or transcending to a distant divine state. The divine has always been present, acting as existence's foundation, awaiting only for human consciousness to become sufficiently lucid, balanced, and discerning to operate in unity with it. It's not about acquiring supernatural powers or special abilities, but about recognizing that our own essence is already intrinsically connected to universal intelligence, ready to express itself fully when we allow our perception to open to it. From this point, the journey changes focus. The objective ceases to be the search for eventual awakening and becomes sustaining this awakening continuously, integrating it into daily life, challenges, relationships, and situations that present themselves. It's about being a living bridge between worlds, the visible and invisible, material and quantum, individual and collective. Being a channel of harmony means allowing quantum manifestation flow to act through you, guiding decisions, events, and experiences naturally, ethically, and aligned with the greater good. It's at this stage that consciousness ceases to be merely a passive observer and becomes a living tool of creation. The separation between who observes and what is observed dissolves, revealing that all experience is an integrated expression of the whole. Each thought, each intention, each conscious action becomes part of a universal dance where quantum manifestation expresses itself organically, sustained by the observer's discernment and ethical alignment. Life ceases to be merely reacted to and begins to be co-created with precision and intelligence, with the clarity of one who understood there's no difference between one's own consciousness and the universal intelligence that permeates everything. In this new perception, reality becomes a faithful mirror of internal alignment. What you feel, what you choose, and what you vibrate echo in the quantum field, bringing coherent experiences, opportunities that once seemed improbable, and connections that sustained collective purpose. Each moment reveals itself as an opportunity to exercise consciousness in its fullness, transforming the everyday into living manifestation of your expanded state, where each action is subtly guided by universal intelligence and the vibrational maturity you've achieved. If you're feeling that it's time to go beyond inspiration and move toward real transformation, I have something special for you. I just launched a limited edition of my exclusive ebook, The Vibrational Awakening, The Quantum Code of Manifestation. This isn't just another book about manifestation. It's a complete system that reveals the specific quantum codes to elevate your vibrational frequency and consciously align with the reality you want to create. These are practical, tested, and proven tools you can implement immediately. In this material, you'll discover the 21-day quantum protocol that reprograms your vibrational frequency at the cellular level, the 7 master frequencies that accelerate manifestations by up to 300%, and advanced energetic cleansing techniques to eliminate invisible blocks you didn't even know existed. But here's the detail. This ebook isn't for everyone. It's a limited edition of only 100 copies, because the level of information I share there requires a real commitment to transformation. It's not another material about positive thinking. It's a technical manual for hacking the matrix of reality and becoming a conscious co-creator of your life experience. If you feel you're ready to take this quantum leap in your manifestation capacity, the link is available in the first pinned comment. But I need to be honest with you. When these 100 copies are gone, there won't be more. It's not a marketing strategy. It's genuinely a limited edition, because the level of support and energy I put into each person who accesses this material has a natural limit. Your vibrational awakening journey is just beginning. The universe conspired for you to arrive here at this exact moment. You can continue applying what you learned today, and you'll already have significant results. Or you can choose to dive completely into the complete system and accelerate your evolution exponentially. The choice is yours, but remember, the universe is waiting to dance with you. The music has already started. You just need to decide if you want to enter the dance floor as a beginner dancer or as a master of quantum co-creation.